Once, mankind accepted a simple truth, that they were not alone in this universe. Some worlds man believed to be home to their gods. Others they knew to fear.
Yo, what up everyone? Tay here. And today we have to talk about what's been going on with the Eternals, because recently a new report came out stating that the Eternals sequel is no longer in active development at Marvel Studios, that it was in development, but now it's basically been canceled. And what we're hearing is that Bob Iger is the one who has nixed the idea and the plans for the Eternals sequel because of how Marvel Studios are refocusing to get the MCU back on track by focusing on big franchises and more popular characters, among various other things they are doing to kind of retool everything. However, there's also some other reports coming out saying that even though the Eternals sequel is not happening anytime soon, that parts of the storyline for the Eternals sequel will still happen during the Multiverse Saga, but that those plans are going to be fit into a different movie that won't be the Eternals sequel. So yeah, we're going to talk all about what's happening with the Eternals in the Multiverse Saga, what projects we could see them in next. Obviously, by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking a lot about Thor 5, but I'll get to that about 10 minutes in, because there is a bunch of other stuff and other projects where the Eternals could tie in as well. So we'll talk about those projects in the first half of the video, and then in the second half, we'll talk all about Thor 5, which I'm really stoked for because I think Thor 5 could be a huge movie coming up in Phase 6. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are new here and a fan of Marvel and the MCU. And also, don't forget to watch until the end of the video because we have a bunch of good Super Thanks questions to get to today regarding other MCU stuff from the last few videos. And remember, if you would like to leave a Super Thanks with a question or a comment on this video, that those are always greatly appreciated and really help out the channel, and that I will read and respond to those in the next video.
Behold, the royal prince of Titan, brother of Thanos, the great adventurer, Star Fox of Mystery Planet.
Alright, so like I mentioned, new reports have come out stating that the Eternals sequel, Eternals Part 2, is no longer in active development at Marvel Studios. And this doesn't mean that another Eternals movie will never be made, like perhaps in Phase 7, but I do think it means that we likely won't get another Eternals movie in Phase 6 or during the remainder of the Multiverse Saga. However, just because Marvel Studios aren't going to do the sequel as a part of Phase 6 does not mean that at least some of the Eternals won't return in some other Phase 6 projects. In fact, after this report came out about Eternals 2 not being in development anymore, prominent scooper My Time to Shine said that some kind of Eternals 2 plotline will happen, but that plotline will be merged with a different upcoming project. And this is kind of what I figured would probably happen when the initial report came out that Marvel Studios weren't doing Eternals 2 anytime soon, because for one thing, under the recent changes at Marvel Studios, it sounds like they are merging a few different projects, and also because even though the Eternals aren't the most popular characters in the MCU, I really don't think that Marvel Studios are just going to drop the characters altogether and act like that first movie never happened, because too much important stuff happened in that movie that Marvel Studios still need to address. Plus, Marvel Studios did include a card that said the Eternals will return at the very end of the Eternals movie, so there's also that as well. Now, of course, we know that we have Avengers 5 and Avengers Secret Wars coming up, and with those serving as the big culmination event for the Multiverse Saga, it would definitely make sense for at least some of the Eternals to play some kind of role in at least one of those movies. But that's something that's got to be set up first. I mean, Marvel can't just drop the Eternals in an Avengers movie without first sort of explaining how they tie in to that story. Because there's still some major loose plot threads from the ending of the first Eternals movie that still need to be resolved. And in case you forgot, what happened at the end of the Eternals movie is we see Thena, Druig, and Makari leave into space to go and search for other Eternals in the cosmos. And while that's happening back on Earth, Cersei, Kingo, and Phastos end up getting abducted by Arishem after they interfered with the Celestials' plans for the birth of Tiamat. And in this scene, Arishem tells them that he will spare the people of Earth for now, but that the Eternals' memories will reveal if humanity is worthy to live or not, and that the Celestials will soon return for judgment.
You have chosen to sacrifice a Celestial for the people of this planet. I will spare them, but your memories will show if they are worthy to live, and I will return for judgment.
Now, in the original Jack Kirby Eternals comics, that story revolved around the Celestials returning to Earth for the first time in thousands of years to judge the world to see if life on Earth was worthy to go on living or should be destroyed by the Celestials. And obviously, with this scene at the end of the Eternals movie, some version of that story is what Marvel Studios seem to be setting up for the Eternals sequel. And in the post-credit scene for the Eternals movie, then we also saw how Thena, Druig, and Makari were found by Eros and Pip, and Eros tells them how the others were taken by Arishem, but that he knows how to find them.
Your friends are in big trouble, and we know where to find them.
And after that first Eternals movie came out, the film's screenwriters, the Firpo cousins, were very open about their ideas for what the sequel was going to be and how the story of the sequel would likely revolve around a big cosmic rescue mission with Eros leading this Eternals group to go and rescue Cersei and the other Eternals from the Celestials. And since the Eternals movie did end with this big cliffhanger of Arishem taking Cersei, Kingo, and Phastos, that's definitely a storyline that seems like it would have to somehow be resolved before the Eternals could show up in Avengers 5 or Avengers Secret Wars. So if we aren't going to get an Eternals sequel before those Avengers movies come out, then we have to talk about which other projects the Eternals could possibly appear in that could somehow tie up that story and that cliffhanger ending. Now, I've seen some people suggest that maybe we are going to see an Eternals and X-Men movie. But again, if something like that were to be developed, I don't think it would happen until after the multiverse saga was over. And with all the Eternals being in space at the end of the first movie, I think it makes sense for the Eternals to show up in one of Marvel Studios' more cosmic MCU projects that are coming up. And we know that the Fantastic Four movie is going to be very cosmic, but I highly doubt that the Eternals would show up in that movie. And there's also been rumors about a Silver Surfer project being in development, but again, I think that's something we probably won't see until Phase 7. And then there's also been rumors that Marvel Studios are developing a legendary Star-Lord project, which seemed to be hinted at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And with Bob Iger wanting the MCU to focus on more big, popular characters going forward, I could definitely see Marvel Studios possibly developing that Star-Lord project as a part of Phase 6. And if we do get a Star-Lord project, then that is something where the Eternals showing up could definitely make sense, especially considering that Quill's father is Ego, a Celestial with a small g. So the whole Ego aspect could definitely be a potential plot connection between Quill and the Eternals. And I do think that Marvel Studios are definitely going to make another Guardians of the Galaxy movie, or maybe it'll be an Annihilators movie, but again, that might not be something we see until Phase 7, maybe not Phase 6. And then another project that a lot of people have been talking about the past week is Nova. And this is because in a recent interview with Marvel producer Brad Winderbaum, he said that a Nova project is in very early stages of development and that he hopes it actually makes it to the screen one day.
Nova. I'm never going to stop asking about Nova until I see Nova.
We love Nova. We are in really early development on Nova. We have a new system behind the scenes at Marvel Studios where we're developing more than we actually will produce. So there are plans to develop Nova. I love Nova too. Like I hope it gets to the screen. You know, the world is chaos, but I would love to see a Nova show one day.
Now, after that interview dropped, This news went all over social media that it's been confirmed that Marvel Studios are making a Nova project. But as we just saw in that clip there, this is very far from confirmation that a Nova project is actually going to happen, especially anytime soon, because Brad Winderbaum said that the project is in very early stages of development because Marvel Studios are working on so many projects at a time and that not all of those projects actually make it to the screen. And you should definitely go watch the full clip to, get the full context of what he says. But you can tell by his demeanor and the way he answers that question that the Nova project is not a for sure thing. It's just something that Marvel Studios are in very early stages of exploring and might end up actually being a project at some point. And I'd love to see a Nova project, but this is just another example of a project that sounds like it's pretty far down the road before it will actually become a reality. However, the one project that I think would make all the sense in the world to feature the Eternals in, and it's a project that I think we will see in Phase 6, is Thor 5. And I have a lot of reasons and a lot of theories why I think this would really make sense and really work that we are going to get to next. Alright, so like most of the projects we will see in Phase 6, Thor 5 has not yet been officially confirmed by Marvel Studios. However, it has been reported to be in development and that Marvel Studios are currently seeking a director who can take the movie in a more dark and serious direction. And I do think that this is probably one of the films that Marvel Studios are looking to release before the end of the multiverse saga, because even though Thor Love and Thunder was also very critically panned, and in my opinion, one of Marvel Studios' worst movies in general, it did actually do well at the box office, and Thor is still one of the most popular characters in the MCU. So I do think that as long as Marvel Studios change up the tone and get a good director, that Thor 5 could be a huge movie for the MCU that they would feel confident in. Plus, another thing is that Loki series producer Kevin Wright has confirmed on multiple occasions that Marvel Studios' plan is to reunite Thor and Loki, saying that the sun will definitely shine on them once again. So even though Thor 4 was critically panned, the Loki series was actually critically praised and is widely considered to be the best MCU Disney Plus show that Marvel Studios has produced. And I bring that up because I think there's a very good chance that a fifth Thor movie could be just as much of a sequel to Loki Season 2 as it will be to Thor 4, and that there's a good chance that Loki will either have a big role in the movie, or at the very least, that Loki's position as the one holding together the multiverse will somehow be very important to the plot of that movie. Now, as far as the Eternals go, the Eternals showing up or somehow factoring into the plot of Thor 5 would make sense for several reasons. For one, Thor 5 will likely have cosmic elements in it, if not be an outright cosmic movie altogether. But more importantly, in the comics, the Eternals and the Asgardians have known each other for centuries and have worked together many times in different big crossover stories. And if you remember, Marvel Studios have actually already set up that same history between the Eternals and the Asgardians in the MCU. Because if we go back to the Eternals movie, there's actually two direct references to Thor and Asgard during the dinner scene at Gilgamesh and Thena's house. One of them is when Kingo says that Thor used to follow him around as a kid, but now that he's a famous Avenger, he won't return Kingo's calls. And then the other reference is when Gilgamesh says that Odin taught him the recipe for his secret homebrew as a thank you to the Eternals helping the Asgardians defeat the Frost Giants during the Battle of Tunsberg.
I was just kidding. Yours is a secret brew. Odin taught me as a thank you after we helped defeat Laufey's army in Tunsberg. Oh.
Speaking of Odin, Thor used to follow me around when he was a little kid. Now he's a famous Avenger and won't return my calls.
And even though those references are said as just kind of passing jokes, this is actually a really big deal because by including these lines, Marvel Studios are confirming that the Eternals have known Odin and Thor and the Asgardians for a long time, and that the Eternals were actually involved in the Battle of Tunsberg that was shown in the first Thor movie and happened all the way back in 965 AD. So with that history between the Asgardians and Eternals already being established, that is just one of the reasons that it would actually make a lot of sense for Thor 5 to be the movie that could resolve those loose plot threads from the end of the Eternals movie. And if we go back to the comics, like I mentioned earlier, in the original Jack Kirby Eternals series, that story revolved around the fourth host Celestial event, which is when the Celestials return to Earth for judgment. And like I said, this seemed to be at least partially the story that Marvel Studios were setting up to adapt in the Eternals sequel.
And I will return for judgment.
Now, Jack Kirby's Eternals series debuted in Marvel Comics back in 1976. And like I said, the whole story revolved around the Celestial Fourth Host event, which ran for 19 issues. But the thing is Jack Kirby never actually got to finish that storyline because Marvel canceled the Eternals comic run before he got a chance to. So we never actually got to see Kirby finish the Fourth Host storyline. However, 4 years later in 1980, Marvel finally went back and concluded the Fourth Host storyline with different writers. And this is where it gets interesting, because they didn't finish that story in an Eternals comic, they instead finished it in a Thor comic. And it was in Roy Thomas's and Mark Grunwald's Thor run, where they did a 16-issue story called The Mighty Thor and the Eternals, the Celestial Saga. And this story was a direct continuation of Jack Kirby's Eternals, where we finally saw how the Celestial Fourth Host event concluded. And I think this is really interesting because this is basically the same situation we are in now with the MCU. Because back then, in the mid-70s, Jack Kirby introduced the Eternals in Marvel Comics with this big and grand cosmic story, but because it wasn't as popular as some of Marvel's other comics, they canceled it before Kirby could finish the story he set up, which then left this big plot thread dangling unresolved for several years. And Marvel Comics recognized that they needed to resolve this storyline, but instead of doing it in a new Eternals comic series, they instead brought back the Eternals in a more popular character's comic, Thor, and told the ending of that story there. And I think this might be very close to what we could see happen in the MCU, where we have this big cliffhanger at the end of the Eternals movie that needs to be resolved, but instead of seeing that resolution happen in an Eternals sequel, I think we might get the resolution of that story in Thor 5. And again, this makes perfect sense to me because the whole story that Marvel Studios seemed to be setting up for the Eternals sequel was the Celestials' Judgment of Earth, which is the same story that was resolved in the Thor Celestial Saga comics back in 1980. And what happens in the Thor Celestial Saga story is a lot of it is about Thor kind of going on this vision quest to discover lost secrets about Odin and the history of Asgard. And what he discovers is that thousands of years ago during the third celestial host, that Odin, Zeus, and the Council of Godheads had learned about the Celestials and their plans to judge Earth in the future. So what happened is Odin, Zeus, and Vishnu went to Earth and confronted Arishem, telling him that if the Celestials did not leave Earth in peace, that the Council of Gods would destroy them. But Arishem then showed them visions of their home realms being destroyed by the Celestials, and this is the fate that would befall Asgard and Olympus if they interfered with the Celestials' plans. So basically the Celestials threatened them and said, hey, if you don't let us do what we want with Earth, we will come and destroy your worlds. So Odin, Zeus, and the Council of Godheads backed down and accepted that the Celestials were too powerful for them to defeat, and they basically vowed their loyalty to the Celestials and to not interfere with the Celestials' plans for Earth. And when Thor learned this, it made him very angry and distraught because he loves Earth, and also Asgard had vowed to protect Earth against any threat because it's one of the 9 realms. So because of this, Thor actually turns against Odin and goes to find the Eternals to join forces with them against the Celestials in order to save Earth. And this actually leads to Odin and Zeus assembling the armies of both Asgard and Olympus to attack Thor and the Eternals, because Odin knows that Thor and the Eternals are no match for the Celestials, and that this attack could lead to the Celestials then turning to destroy Asgard. So what we see happen is this big battle ensues with Thor and the Eternals fighting against Zeus and Odin and the armies of Asgard and Olympus. And in the end, Thor and the Eternals are defeated. However, the story doesn't end there because, of course, Thor and the Eternals are still set on saving Earth. And when we get to the final issue of this story, which occurs in Thor issue 300, Thor finds out that Odin had never really planned on obeying the Celestials when he made his vow to them thousands of years ago, and that Odin only said this so he could take that time to figure out a way to stop the Celestials from destroying Earth when the time came. Because Odin knew that Asgard was not powerful enough to defeat the Celestials when he first encountered them, but he also knew that he had 1,000 years before the Celestials would return to Earth, so he would just use that time to figure out a plan how to defeat them when the time came. So on that day, on the Day of Judgment, when the Celestials do return, what happens is Odin basically assembles all of the forces of Asgard into this energy form to enter the gigantic version of the Destroyer armor so that they can use the Destroyer to defeat the Celestials. So this big battle ensues with the forces of Asgard inside the Destroyer armor and the Eternals using the Unimind to try and defeat the Celestials. But in the end, it still doesn't work because the Celestials are just too powerful. And what ends up happening is Gaia, the goddess of Earth, shows up with 12 of her godchildren, who are all basically spawned out of the nobility of humanity. And this is what ends up ending the whole conflict, because Arishem, upon seeing the wondrous creation of Earth, in these 12 gods, that he judges Earth as worthy. And another thing that happens at the end of the story is this is also when Thor learns that his true mother is actually Gaia, which makes him the son of 2 gods, and also reveals his greater connection to Earth. So yeah, and even though this story heavily features the Eternals and is the ending of Jack Kirby's Eternals story, it really is centered around the history of Asgard and Thor's personal journey of self-discovery and what it means to be a god of both Earth and Asgard. And I think if we do end up seeing the Eternals appear in Thor 5, that this is probably very similar to how it will be treated, where even though the Eternals will be a big part of the movie, the plot of the film will still center around Thor and his personal journey. Now, of course, we don't know a bunch of confirmed details about the plot of Thor 5, but what we have heard from different rumors and scoops is that the movie will start off with Hercules coming after Thor to get revenge for what happened to Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder, but that at some point in the movie, Thor and Hercules will join forces against a much greater threat. Now, who knows if there's any truth to that? But in general, a storyline like that would definitely make sense. And one of the other comic runs I've seen a lot of people hoping to see adapted into Thor 5 is the Chaos War series, where Thor and Hercules end up teaming up with a bunch of other gods and powerful characters nicknamed the God Squad to take on the Chaos King. And the Chaos King is a dark cosmic being who is connected to eternity, and in this storyline he is waging war against all the gods in existence and is threatening the survival of the universe. And as cool as it would be to see the Chaos King in the MCU, I kind of doubt that's the villain they would go with for Thor 5, because he's not super well known outside of, hardcore comic book fans. And also, that whole storyline of the Chaos King waging war against all the gods is very similar to the plot we saw with Gore in Thor: Love and Thunder. However, if Marvel Studios do take plot elements for their plans for Eternals 2 and kind of merge those story elements into the plot of Thor 5, then I could definitely see Marvel Studios using the Celestials as the big villains or major antagonists of the movie. And perhaps the same way we saw the team of gods, the God Squad, come together in the Chaos War comic, perhaps we could see something similar to that in Thor 5, where Thor and Hercules could team up with some of the Eternals to take on the Celestials, because only gods like Asgardians, Olympians, and Eternals would be powerful enough to take on the Celestials. And if we do see the Eternals in Thor 5 or a different project coming up, I don't know if we'll see all of them return, but I definitely think that we'll see Eros involved in some way, because with Marvel Studios casting Harry Styles in that role, I think they have very big plans for Eros to be a big character in the MCU because, he's a very popular actor. So maybe we could see Thor and Hercules teaming up with Eros, Pip, Athena, Druig, and Makkari to go on a mission to save Circe, Kingo, and Phastos from the Celestials, and then once they are rescued, Circe could tell the others about Arishem and the Celestials' plans to go and judge Earth, and from there we see all of the characters rushing to Earth to stop the Celestials and their plans for judgment and potentially destroying the world. Very similar to what happened in the Thor and Eternals Celestial Saga comic. I mean, Marvel Studios could even title Thor 5 Thor: Twilight of the Gods after the final chapter of that Thor and Eternals comic run. So yeah, you guys let me know what you think of all this. Do you think Thor 5 makes the most sense for the Eternals to appear in? Or do you think it'll be a different project? Or do you just not care either way? So yeah, leave your theories down in the comments below. And let's wrap this video up because I think it's been going for a while. However, don't go anywhere just yet because we do still have good Super Thanks questions to get to. So let's get to those.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's jump into these Super Thanks. And right off the bat, we have two from our regulars, Gator Chris and Paul Sanford. And Paul also adds, by the way, still waiting on merch from you. And yes, thank you, Paul. Yeah, I know a few of you guys have told me, hey, we still want merch. I'm working on it. I know I'm overly perfectionist about this stuff. I'm too picky about all of it. And it's also been hard to get designs done on a budget. So I've just been making some designs myself, which I have 2 going right now that I do like. And yeah, I'm just working on getting those finished and polished up. But yeah, I promise I'm working on the merch. And then the next one we have is $5 from Sean Pattonwade 1688, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but this one says, "Been with you since the beginning. You actually shouted me out once. Always worth the wait for you, bro." All right, thank you very much for that, Sean. Always good to see someone who's been around since the beginning. And then next we have $5 from Steve McT. And this one says, "Your theory on Deadpool, Alioth, and Cassandra Nova in the Void/Battle World is so good. I have yet to see anyone else mention psychic attacks, etc. I think you might have hit the nail. Love the videos, man." Yeah, man, thank you. I thought that video was awesome. I thought I had good theories and good points in that video. It was a lot of fun to make. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see what is correct, what isn't correct. But those of you who haven't seen it yet should definitely check it out. It's one I released on Deadpool and Wolverine a few videos back, talking all about stuff that could happen in that movie and how Alioth could actually be a really big deal and big character in that film that ties into stuff happening with Avengers Secret Wars and a bunch of other stuff as well. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it, Steve, and thank you for the 5. And then the next one we have is $6.99 from D Walker. And this one says, "What up, Tay? Great video. I completely agree with you about Marvel Studios most likely delaying Secret Wars until 2028 so they can capitalize on the 20th year anniversary, just like they did for Infinity War on the 10-year anniversary. I was wondering, though, what Disney Plus shows are we getting next? I know Agatha comes out in the fall, and it looks like Daredevil will most likely be in 2025. But what's the next series to drop after that? Thanks again, Tay. Keep killing it." All right. Thank you very much, D Walker. And as far as which MCU shows we'll see over the next few years, we know that the next few live-action shows we have coming up are Agatha, Ironheart, and Daredevil Born Again. And then after that, we'll probably see Wonder Man and Daredevil Season 2, because according to reports, Daredevil is being filmed as an 18-episode show, but apparently Marvel Studios are going to cut that into 2 9-episode parts and drop them as Season 1 and Season 2 or something like that. But then after those shows, it's kind of hard to know what other shows we'll get because so many shows have been rumored and reported to be in development. But we're hearing that Bob Iger wants Marvel Studios to focus more on serialized shows with multiple seasons instead of doing one-off shows to set up movies, and that Marvel Studios are also looking to make the shows more focused on grounded and street-level content, as to where the movies can then focus on some of the bigger stuff like the cosmic side and, multiversal side of the MCU. So yeah, we'll have to wait for some more concrete information and some official announcements, which will probably come at Comic-Con and D23 later this summer. But until then, all we can do is rely on scoops, reports, and theories. So yeah, thank you very much again for that question, D. Walker. And then we do have one more to get to from Aaron, because Aaron left a super thanks a few videos back. So yeah, this one's kind of a delayed super thanks. And it says, what are your thoughts on the rest of the Phase 5 and Phase 6 stuff? I know Marvel has reshot and rewritten stuff, but the 2025 films look like a mixed bag. I think Cap 4 and Fantastic Four can be reconfigured and be good, but I'm really not that excited about the Thunderbolts or Blade unless they have other cool characters pop up, a la Daredevil, the Punisher, mutants, etc. What do you think about the 2025 slate, and do you think they can get back to the old MCU magic with these projects, or will that mojo wait until Secret Wars? I personally think they will gear up to release Spider-Man, Shang-Chi 2, and Doctor Strange 3 in 2026, and push back Avengers 5 and Secret Wars a year for each of them to have time to set it up. Your thoughts? P.S. Drop that KindaCulty mixtape on Spotify because the intro music is fire, and I would totally listen to those beats. All right. Thank you, Aaron. And as far as the 2025 movie releases, I'm personally really excited for the Fantastic Four because I think Matt Shakman is a really good person to direct that movie. And I do have faith that Marvel Studios are getting their mojo back and that some really big stuff is coming and that they are fixing things. And even though I'm not personally a big fan of Bob Iger, and I'm not really even personally a fan of Disney in general, I'm a fan of Marvel Studios. But I do think that Bob Iger coming back is a really good thing for Marvel Studios, and that the changes he's putting in place, even though a lot of people are upset about projects like Eternals 2 getting canceled, I think what he's doing is exactly the kind of stuff that needs to be done, slowing down production, not rushing stuff, and focusing on bigger projects with better stories instead of just kind of going through the motions and just rushing projects out. But I do think that stuff is going to get better overall, and that it'll kind of continue to get better and better as we get closer and closer to Secret Wars. Or at least that's my hope. So yeah. And then as far as the music goes, I'm glad you like it. The 2 tracks that you hear in the videos, the main background track and then the outro track, are actually electronic songs I made on Logic with my MIDI synth like 8 or 9 years ago. And funnily enough, I actually don't really like the main song that you're talking about that you hear in the background and in the intro, because it's just a little bit too upbeat and poppy for my taste. And most of the music I make is darker, kind of heavy, cinematic, industrial stuff. But I still use it in the videos because it seems to work well as a backing track to kind of keep the tone of the videos, more upbeat. And I do still record music all the time, but I haven't released any of it online or on Spotify because just like with the merch, I think I get overly picky and perfectionist about stuff, and I'm always thinking it's not ready and that I can make it better before it's done. But yeah, on a whole separate thing, separate from the channel, I am working on finishing up a batch of songs right now that hopefully I can get mastered and put on Spotify within the next, 6 months or so. So yeah, once that happens, I'll definitely mention it in a video for anyone who's interested. So yeah, I'm glad you like the music though. Thank you very much. And thank you to all you guys for leaving those super thanks. And I think that's it for this video, and we can wrap it up. I hope you guys like this one. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you are new here. And if you missed any of the other recent videos, like the one I just did on Phase 6, or the Deadpool 3 video on Alioth and Secret Wars before that, definitely check those out. They're linked in the description down below. And also remember, if you would like to leave a super thanks with a question or a comment on this video, that I will read and respond to those in the next video, and that they definitely help out the channel a lot. But yeah, I think that's everything. Hope you guys like this one. Come follow the channel on Twitter for updates, or just come hit me up there. And I will be back soon.